Okay, we are live. Hello, everyone. I'm going to look into this camera here, but I'm sitting right across from my divine counterpart, Kelley, who you should be able to hear. Hopefully, you can hear me as well. So, can you give us a quick sound check in the comments? Welcome all for a very special first episode of a very exciting new series that we are beginning today. And we're going to get into a bit of context as to why we're sort of starting this now and what it's all about. And
Yeah, we have a brand new setup. So normally we would be side by side talking into the camera, but we decided to do this new setup where we're talking to each other. So David has been hard at work setting up like two different microphones, two different cameras. So yeah, we just want to make sure that everything is working out for you guys, and this is like kind of our first test. So I don't know, honey, I can't see the comments at all. Can
Okay.
you? No, and I was hoping that I would be able to.
You click on the chat.
Click on the chat.
Can hear, but it sounds like echoing when David speaks. Oh, does it? So you can hear it back in. Rachel, can you hear it back in an echo when I talk now? Is that what you're saying? Because before we get into the nuggets of wisdom, we want to make sure the sound is perfect.
Sound is perfect, loud and clear, and then echoing when David speaks. So it's okay when I speak. Should I try to mute my microphone when you speak?
No, it's okay.
No?
Should be fine. I was going to wait until someone says something. Can anybody else hear an echo? Is it just me? Sounds good now. What it is fine for you both. Sounds good now.
Awesome.
Hello, Thomas. Welcome, Thomas.
Ah, we're so
Good
excited.
here.
Yeah,
Okay.
this is totally new. So you know us, we always have to work out all the bugs.
And we're quite close to each other, so there might be some feedback. So I may have to just be careful of how loud I talk. Okay, I hear none. All right, guys. Well, welcome. We are very excited to share today's show with you. It's all about repurpose. Really, probably should have titled it as repurpose, as we are at a critical time in humanity's awakening. And if you're live tonight, if you're watching this, then you are part of that. So, congratulations, I think. But it's quite a time, and I know many of us have been feeling lots of strong ascension symptoms, if we call it by that label. But we've been feeling these energies very, very strong. Those of us who are very sensitive to energies pick up on it. And we're going to maybe get into a little bit of that today. But about 2 years ago, those of you who are part of our mailing list will know from a little short blurb I put on a mail out today, Kelley and I began a teaching from an incredible guy. I'm going to get into who it is and all this. Many of you know it already because we've talked about him before if you followed us regularly on our meditations every month. And I essentially reached out to some of the masters that we were working with for a new teacher. Anyway, that was presented to me through a friend of mine, and that was Joel Goldmsmith. And we'll get into who Joel is a little bit more in the show here. But long story short, when we started to get into Joel's teachings, it was rapidly apparent how much we were sort of, what's that? Now Dave is echoing. Okay. When did you guys break up?
How about now? Ask them now. I turned off my mic.
You turned it off now? Yeah, you shouldn't be able to hear me now. So,
No, you should be able to hear you.
sorry, you shouldn't be able to hear me echoing now in Kelley's thing is what I'm saying. Okay, maybe while I'll talk, then you'll just turn off your mic. Yeah, as I was sort of sharing, and let us know if there's still an echo, guys, and we'll work that out. But it should be, if Kelley turns her mic off, there should be no echo.
Okay, we need to address the separation thing.
Hold on, we'll get to that in a second. Yeah, so when we started to get into these teachings, it was quite apparent that we needed quite a few perspective shifts, and the spiritual place that we thought we were quite far behind that. And I think what Joel has done for us is, aside from all the practices that we're going through, and we're going to get into some tonight, he's allowed us to shift our perspective in some areas that as we meet other people on the path, they seem to be in the same place that we were before we got into Joel's teachings. Now, that's not to say that we're any better than anybody else or anything to that effect. But what it sort of revealed to us was, after we got into Joel's teachings, maybe I'll put me on, hold on. When we got into Joel's teachings, and I'll bring Kelley back on in a second here, is that she's here. She's just like sitting in the other side of the room. Was that we could share this. So after about 1.5 years, 2 years of practicing some incredible things, we have experienced some quite miraculous events. We haven't got all day to go into that today because it would take all day to sort of go through all the things that have happened. But what we wanted to do was start to get into a place where we could share some of this stuff. Because we're sort of 2 years in to this, we didn't really know where to begin. So today we're going to begin with what you'll see we're going to begin with. It's kind of a couple of topics, but it's all about connecting to God. And I want to talk about that for a second, and I'll bring Kelley on the mic here in a sec. Is that word God, for everyone that I've spoken to, certainly, it's a very interesting word because some people are fine with it. Some people have no issue with the word itself. Other people have dogma and trauma and things attached to that word. And so when you talk about God, they kind of get that little bit of a cringe, whether it's from religion or whatever it's from, maybe a family lineage in religion or something. And so I want to just maybe start with an exercise with you and just get you to say God in your mind and see how your body reacts. What does your emotional body do when you say the word God? And really pay attention to that. And then when you've done that, I'm going to give you a moment to do it here, is I want you to imagine being out and about, maybe in the grocery store, wherever it is. And I want you to imagine saying God to somebody else. And how would that make you feel? That has your emotional body react when you say God to someone else in the presence of another person? So I'm going to give you a minute to do that. So please do that. And I'd like to hear what you say in the comments. So I'm going to give you a second to do that. Yeah.
Well, the last time I brought up God, I was told the person I said it to told me he worships Satan.
That's a true story. It happened a few days ago, yeah.
Yeah. So I was a little bit taken back by that, and I was just like, oh, okay, are you joking or are you serious? And yeah, the next day you saw the same guy wearing like the pentagram Satanist shirt and all of that. So, you know, we really don't know how we're going to be met, you know, when we start speaking these truths and our truths to people. And sometimes when you're just there outshining the light, you do get met with a lot of resistance, especially if you are kind of shining that really high vibrational light on somebody's darkness where they're trying to hide. So that was our experience. That was interesting. But I don't know. I think now is a good time to bring up what Joel says about words, because you're going to find as we start unpacking some of these teachings of Joel Goldsmith, he talks about God, Christ, Jesus. He always refers to God as the Father. So these words can be super triggering for many people on the spiritual path, especially. A lot of people have had run-ins with religion. They've had it forced on them when they were growing up. But Joel himself said he uses the language of Christian mysticism simply because that was always his personal search, like was in the direction of Jesus the Christ. But he also commented that he could rewrite every single one of his books in the language of Hebrew mysticism, Oriental mysticism, Hindu, Chinese, Japanese, because the principles taught in the message is universal. And he really advertise to students, like, don't get caught up on particular words. Just try to catch the spirit behind the word. And basically, just if you're willing to, then set aside your assumptions about specific words and receive the messages with an open mind, because you will then catch the spirit and often come to understand more profound meanings for a lot of these words used.
Right. Yeah. And, a big thing about being in this particular time and being around other people is being able to, especially when you go quite deep into spiritual teachings and practice yourself, is we sort of have an obligation to share things when it so arises with people. For example, myself, whenever I get into an interaction with someone, it really is from the true nature of me. So whenever anyone has a conversation with me, I'm going to be making it spiritual, whatever they're talking about. And so it is important to be able to share ourselves spiritually, share our teachings with people and finding out where they're at. And a lot of people have got this issue with the word God. There's no two ways about it. Like, we've experienced it when we're out and about, haven't we? And so we wanted to just sort of talk about that, because if there's anybody listening, and whatever your spiritual lean or religion or whatever it is, it's welcome here. We will be using the word God quite a bit. And if you're having an issue with that in these shows, then just replace it with source or whatever. Prime Creator is a good one. Creator. What are you doing? You're writing down something.
Well, I'm just trying to keep track of the comments. Janice asked about major events coming up.
Okay, we'll do a Q&A at the end.
Yeah, I'm just making notes so that I don't forget to answer her comment, because yes, there are, and we will get into that at the end of the show. So it's nice that I can actually read the comments, because before, when we do our meditations, I've got my eyes closed. You've got the computer. I can't see what's going on. So this just opens so much up for the conversation. So we've got tons of comments coming in. So why don't you take a look and just see how people are feeling about this
I will,
word.
but we haven't even started the show already.
Yeah, but you asked a question, and now they're all answering.
Oh, I see what you mean. I did ask a question, yeah.
You did. So you said you want to go to the comments.
All right, so let's take a minute to look at those. Good point. Good job, Good job one of us is plugged in,
Someone says, I love God. There's just many, many, many things about God. Someone says that the biblical description... Karen said the biblical description of God is the description of Satan and the opposite of divine creator. So again,
interesting.
It's all about duality, right? And that belief in two powers, and how a lot of the times the biblical descriptions and religion tends to really push that story, tends to push that separation, tends to push that idea that this God and this Satan exist as separate entities outside of ourselves. And we just don't personally believe that that's the case. I do think that the Bible and religion itself, has been altered to push a certain narrative. And that's why we search so deep to find truth that really resonates. And I don't know, the Bible, religion, Christianity, like, that's been a part of my life. That was my first taste of God. And yeah, I've always been very, very resistant to it. And it's incredible because Joel has a way of teaching and talking about scriptural things that all of a sudden it's like these aha moments. I'm really starting to understand scripture and a lot of these biblical sayings and phrases in a whole new light. And I guess we should maybe get into some of the other context.
Yeah, I'm going to start the slideshow. So we have a slideshow for you to just sort of follow along with. David Wilcock style, I suppose. But it's a very, very good point. And it is a sort of a precursor to the material that we're going to be going through, because there is a lot of terminology with God. There's a lot of terminology with the word Christ, which I'll get to in a minute. Which many of you already know, but I'm just going to go over it anyway. There is a lot of Christian Bible scripture, which one of the things that Joel has done, because Joel started as a mystic, really a Christian mystic and a Christian healer, because his father was he by accounts his father was healed. He healed his father, who was very, very sick. And sorry, yeah, we'll get into that. It was a Christian healer who healed his father. Sorry, not him. And that is what got him into Christian. That's really what started him on the path of mysticism. And he was in Christianity, and he sort of evolved out of it and beyond it, and studied all the religions. We'll get into a little bio of him. But what he has managed to do, when you have a mystic who takes scripture, and when I say a mystic, someone who's got skin in the game, right? Someone who's got documented miraculous healings, as we would see it, kind of like Jeshua, when he has well documented people around him applying the same teachings and experience the same thing, the same levels of harmony, the same healings, etc., the same levels of illumination to some degree. You have an idea of how powerful someone is activated. And it does seem as though he was very much this way. And certainly his teachings that we practice represent that 100%. So when you have someone like this who's talking about scripture and really breaking it down, it's quite fascinating, because you get a whole different flavor of the Christian Bible, whole new appreciation for it, actually. Perhaps more of a revelation than before on how Christians have got that wrong, and how they have misinterpreted things to really steer themselves away from finding God within. You're gone.
Yeah, well, true Christianity, Joel refers to it as the true Christ teachings. Mm-hmm. And so much of that has been lost and diluted. And that's really Joel's purpose for this teaching. So I feel like we should start our slideshow, and we're going to touch on a lot of those points.
Indeed.
Well, you put effort into it, so let's start it.
Let's see if we can let's put us.
Where can we be?
Let's
there
put
we
us
are.
down here.
Okay, look at that.
All right, my friends, welcome to, and the reason why, again, we want to share what we're going to share today is because what we are practicing here has brought, and we're certainly not illumined yet by any stretch of the imagination, and we'll get into that word in a bit, is that it has brought a level of harmony and flow and miraculous events to our life that we hadn't really experienced before. In fact, we definitely hadn't experienced before, and we'd experienced quite a bit before. So that's kind of saying something. And so we're at a point now where we can share this stuff. So context, we're kind of in that a little bit. Now, what's important is when it comes to practicing teaching, especially if you're in a couple, if you're in a single, watching this doesn't apply. But if you're in a couple, if you're in a relationship, it's very likely that you'll receive and process and practice things very different to your partner. And as you can see from this image, Kelley is very sort of flowing and fun and out there. And I'm much more of a sort of a dissector and a planner. So I thought these pictures kind of did quite a good job of representing that. But I can tell you for a fact that we are very, very different when it comes to processing information. And I guess we're at different points on our spiritual journey, so to speak. And we sort of are on it together anyway. But when I receive something and she doesn't, that doesn't mean, and you can apply this to your own relationship wherever you are, it doesn't mean that you're wrong and she's right, or vice versa. It just means that you're having your experience for you. You know? You want to add to that, Pookie? I know you do.
No, I just feel like this is a great image. Yes, I love that you chose those pictures, and I haven't seen them for a while. So yeah, we are very, very different. We've said it before. We'll say it again. We're complete opposites in the way that we do things, in the way that we just react, in the way that we respond. We're in completely different places, even in our spiritual unfoldment. But because we have the core values and we both have the same teaching as kind of our core principle, we are still able to sit there and bounce ideas off of each other. And we always end up coming to that place where we can both agree and we can both move forward together. So if you're understanding something differently than I think that the diverse perspectives are where it's at. Like, that's so great that we have that, because it just opens me to such a more expansive way of looking at something. It opens you to such a more expansive way of looking at something. I tend to be very emotional. Maybe that's just the female. You tend to be, very logical and dissective. And yeah, it's just very, very, very equal, very opposite. And I'm just so grateful to have somebody who is that accountability partner, who is that just, person who pulls me along, pulls me on that path. Like, I've always been a very spiritual person. I've always been very into energy and vibration, and I was definitely on the spiritual path before I met you. And I would say you were on the spiritual path before you met me, but would we be here at this level of unfoldment if we weren't here together? Absolutely not.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, totally. Okay, let's carry on. So I wanted to touch on Adam and Eve because we're we're in the context and precursor part here before we get into some of the meat of today's information. And there are lots of different versions of the Adam and Eve story, lots of different translations of it, lots of different meanings of it, and whatever meaning you have for you is right. For me, in studying a lot of different works, and especially Radu Cinema's works recently, Forgotten Genesis, is a very interesting part there about the beginning of humanity. And I think we're beginning to understand now, as humans on this earth, that we weren't the first ones here. We certainly weren't the first intelligent ones here. And there's more and more and more and more information coming out that represents that. And I think, and I know quite a bit about that from what I have studied and the people I've spoken to, as many of you listening to this do. But I think even I'm going to be, and even we are going to be shocked on the revelations of the actual truth of humanity, because the truth goes deep, it goes wide, and it goes very, very far back in Earth time. So I think the Adam and Eve story for me represents the beginning of duality. And we're going to get into the prime concept as to why there's only one reason why humanity is in the dualistic place that it's in. Very simple, right? It's only one reason. That's good news. It's only one. There's not like 10,000. You see all these divisive things. There's not 50 of them. There's one thing. And all the mystics talk about this, and Joel especially. And it's the belief in a power apart from God. It's a belief in two powers, good and evil. And the original blueprint for Adam and Eve was really a God-realized avatar, was a physical human being who had a high level of Christhood, a high level of Christ activation, and was able to embody the Christedness, if you like. And what the Garden of Eden represents, however it happened, whatever the event was in the Garden of Eden, whether it was a singular thought that came in, whether it was thought manipulation, whether it was thought interference, we really don't know that. And it's kind of irrelevant anyway. But it's interesting to think about. But that was the beginning of suddenly Adam and Eve, or Adam or Eve, or both of them, thought that there was a power apart from God. And before that moment, whatever it was in the Garden of Eden, maybe it's a place, maybe it's not. It's very difficult to find that information out. And again, it doesn't matter necessarily, but that was the beginning of duality.
Absolutely. That's eating from the knowledge of the tree of good and evil. So as soon as, like, it talks about temptation, like we're all tempted by this darkness to move into a place of fear. And that's basically the whole story of Genesis, the whole story of Adam and Eve. The serpent came and tempted with knowledge of the tree of good and evil. And that was absolutely the fall into duality. Joel actually talks about it. He tells that entire story. And I think it's a great story to unpack. And the way that he puts it in terms of consciousness, of falling into duality. Of course, the Bible doesn't go that deep into that understanding, and I think it's a really important place to start. So maybe in one of our future episodes we can go more in depth into that. But it's obviously made humanity fall into a place where we've accepted that knowledge of good and evil. So we believe in the light and the darkness. And again, most people that you talk to are going to say, like, the light cannot not exist without the darkness. The, dark and light exists within all of us. And maybe somebody who's really deep on the infinite way path is going to say, no, the darkness does not exist. But the truth of the matter is really that darkness does exist here. Duality does exist here in humanness, in the physical reality. But like you said, there's always an answer, and darkness actually can't exist in the presence of light. So
Right.
It's so powerful for us to get to come in and be the light. But it is important to note that, duality does exist here. It's just the humanness and the fall from Adam and Eve being godlike, being perfect, living in the kingdom of heaven, living for 900 plus years. And as soon as the knowledge of good and evil entered their thought, it was almost like, the creation of that material mind. It came into form, and it's existed into form ever since. And that's just, humanity is just fallen deeper and deeper and deeper into duality. And now we're living in a place where we are so separate and apart from God. We don't even know our true identity. We don't know our purpose. We don't know why we're here. And that's really why we are doing these teachings. We're finding our way back to truth. And we would love to talk about that and express that in real time as it's unfolding for us, as we're learning. And it's great because we can, use our community and bounce ideas off of everybody as well.
100%. Yeah, well said, sweetie. Yeah, so whatever you believe in the Adam and Eve story is relevant to you. I do want to bring up a concept or a thing I've noticed in the world, and this was certainly me and us, I would say, a little while ago, is that across the breadth of the spiritual community, and this applies to anything you hear today, by the way, there is a lot of, I would say the vast majority of people who are on the spiritual path have only an intellectual knowledge of spirituality. And this is not meant in any demeaning way, because we're certainly still there in part, and we were there more so before we began the Infinite Way teachings. And it was quite a revelation, in fact, as to the difference between intellectually knowing something. You can be very well versed in something, and the actual realization of it, which is knowing. As Jeff always says, to truly know is to be, not to know about. For example, you can't go into a store and someone can say to you, well, no, you don't have a human body. You know you have a human body, and you're not going to argue with them because you just know it. You have one. So that's how you sort of make that determination between knowing, being, and intellectually knowing something. And I find that I hesitate to put numbers on this, but every single spiritual person that I've interviewed and spoken to has only an intellectual knowledge of spirituality. And again, that is not a slight on them. It's not saying that they're any less or any nonsense like that. It's an observation that I've made, that we have made. And the only way to move beyond that is to start practicing the mystical teachings. And most people do not. They just sort of throw a little meditation here or there. They have a stricter thought routine. They maybe practice the vibrations of love more, but they haven't got a dedicated mystical practice. And certainly what we are learning with the Christhood activations that we are going through is that if you want to elevate to this status of mystical presence, practicing the presence of God, you have to be extremely dedicated to the path. And we're going to get into some of this in a minute with Dying Daily. But if you're just poking at spirituality, you're going to remain in duality for quite a while. And that's not to say that there's anything wrong with you or anything wrong with that. But I want to make it very, very clear that the mystical path is not an easy path. And in fact, and I'll get into this in a minute, it is the highest acclaim of having a physical body. It's the highest acclaim. Now, we've been taught that the duality of things, the material world achievements, fame, fortune, money, things, marriage, possessions, etc., is the height of achievement in this world. And that is true of the material world, but it is in the opposite direction to your true purpose. And this is what we're reversing right now. We're reversing moving from material sense to spiritual sense. And in order to get over here and rise above the disharmony which is caused by duality, aka the belief in two powers, you have to have a level of dedication, that which most people really don't know they have to have yet. And so our hope with these teachings is that we're going to start to feed some of the things that we're experiencing, certainly, but some of the teachings that we feel is going to assist the planet in achieving a lasting harmony, because collective harmony is achieved through individual ascension.
Yeah, babe, 100%. So I get what you're saying. I know you're not trying to be condescending, and I know we're not there yet. We are really just trying to walk that spiritual path, and in order to truly walk it, we need to overcome the belief in two powers. And it's very difficult because we live in the material, human, physical sense where duality absolutely exists. We're not denying that. It's every appearance of everything you can see is disharmony, is discord, is sickness, is sin. It's everywhere. And it's seeing beyond the appearance. It's seeing through all of that to the truth of reality, which is the very seed of all life, which is God and consciousness. And it's very difficult to see beyond the appearance. So I think you wanted to talk a little bit more about the reign of two powers.
Let's continue, because we're going to be here for 2 hours. Otherwise, it's
going to be... We are not moving. We're like past our second point, and we have like 100 points on the paper.
Whenever we watch David Wilcock, he's got like a 4-hour show. Like, how does he even do that? And now we're beginning to...
When David said he wanted to provide context, I got terrified.
Oh my goodness. So we've discussed this a little bit. Let's go into it a little bit more here. The only, maybe be a broken record here, the only thing that has caused harmony and discord in the material world is a belief in good and evil, is a belief there is a power separate and equal or opposite to God.
Yeah, a power that can cause harm.
Right. Yeah, well,
that can cause you harm.
right,
A
a
power
separate
in
power.
evil, that like believing that Satan does exist, believing in a power of darkness, like giving darkness and having fear and actually giving it power. And you only do so by believing in it, believing in its existence.
Yep. So let's go into that. What are some examples of a belief in two powers? Well, anything that causes you disharmony in your life. If there is anything right now that you are causing, that you are allowing, to cause you disharmony in your life, whether it's financial problems, whether it's a relationship problem, whether it's a health problem, somewhere in your consciousness, you believe there is a power separate and apart from God. Now, when you follow the mystical teachings, when you follow the mystics' commentary on this, the narrative on this, when you get out of the way and let divine, let source, let God be the governing body of your life to such an extent where you've practiced that presence so much that you've elevated into that fourth dimensional consciousness. We're going to get to that in a minute. Or as Joel would say, having the mind that was in Christ Jesus. And we're going to expand upon that. You will elevate above all the material discord in your life. So how the heck, go on.
I think you should just talk about Atlantis, Lemuria,
I will.
Galactic cycles,
I will.
and then we'll get into all of it.
I will. So just to finish off that point, yeah, we did need to keep moving on. I got the mic now. There's nothing she can do.
Yeah, I need to learn how to just cut him off and keep him on track.
You can just press pause, but you can press mute. Anyway, so this concept, I want to drill down on this concept because it's extremely important, and it was when we realized this, not when we knew it intellectually, when we realized it, and it kind of dropped for us at different points, but very close together actually, if I remember. When I realized this, it was a very revelatory experience because when we're looking at things with the spiritual lens and looking at the world and looking at all the harmony and disharmony and division, you've not got to go far to see it. It's everywhere. You start to fragment yourself off into thinking, oh, I need to fix this and fix that and fix this. And for us, our purpose is really to add value and serve the world and serve God's purpose. You can be taken in so many different directions. It's quite overwhelming very, very quickly. And so when you pull back and you say, well, hold on a minute, if that's true, and you go deep into that revelation of the only reason people are having disharmony in their lives is because they're not allowing the divine mind to run their life. They're allowing the ego mind to run their life, the material mind. Well, that's a whole different problem that we have to solve. And it's a different level of digging that we have to go down to. So I wanted to talk about the two powers because it's extremely simple, but it's extremely important that people get this because they think that's wrong and that's wrong. No, that's not the issue. The issue is the belief in two powers always.
Yeah, and you're talking about, us even coming into that realization, but it's not to say that we're fully realized. Like, we do understand very intellectually because we have done a lot of these teachings, but I know that the belief in two powers still creeps into my mind all the time because I still have fear, I still have doubt, I still feel like I can get sick. So only until we aren't getting sick and we aren't having any discord and disharmony in our life is when we truly become realized and we've risen above the belief in two powers. And again, yes, we have pockets of having these realizations, and yes, things start to go incredibly harmonious and very abundant in our lives, and as we start to live by grace, and we are achieving more and more of that, but it's still very much happening where we still get pulled back into the humanness and back into the universal mind and all of that stuff. So we are going to talk more of that if you just want to continue on about your Atlantis and Lemuria because you wanted to talk about that before we are moving on here.
100%. It's a really important point that because also it allows, and she's absolutely right, we still do phase into this. I would say just from my personal experience, I don't as much anymore. because we're all, very different. We go through our different experiences. I don't feel like I really do as much now because of this part realization, but the more and more it's realized, I experience less and less. I never get sick. Disharmony never really comes to my life at all. And anyway, that's what I'm saying. But hold
I
on.
can attest to that. That's very true.
Yeah. So, but what's also important is that we do have, now and again, we do have elements that come back that do represent what could be determined as discord in our life, because we can see the contrast, and we can see how it's different when we're practicing the presence and in the flow to when we revert back and react. We can see the difference, and it's very, very noticeable to see those two worlds. So it's actually very important to not feel like, oh my God, I'm going backwards, or I haven't got it yet. Don't go to any of these silly places that we program ourselves to go. Is to say, no, hold on a minute. It's very interesting because, I can see that I'm actually on the path, because now I can really see the contrast. And that's really, really important.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just having that awareness, and it's just another piece of moving through the unfoldment. And now you're able to see when you're really living in that divine flow, and you can immediately determine when you're out of it. And then you got to get yourself back into it, because again, we have free will choice. So it's all about choosing what experience we want to have and where we want to be.
100%. Yeah. Okay. Let's move on.
Keep flowing, babe. Let's go.
Okay.
We're almost an hour.
Just quickly, many of you know the story of Atlantis, Lemuria, and many other civilizations. In fact, Atlantis was massive. It was a very, very big empire, not just one continent. It was sort of spread over most of the world. And what's interesting is, since the Adam and Eve moment, if you like, we've seen the records of duality move through all the ages, from the falls, plural, of Atlantis, through esoteric Egypt, and sort of the hierarchical nature of the kings and what have you, all the way through to Jeshua's entrance. We see that duality started to fall further and further and further and further. And again, the fact that this has happened, the fact that we've fallen so far from grace, if you like, is very good, because now we get to, again, with the contrast, look back and go, okay, well, this is what we have done wrong, and we don't want to go back there again, because the disharmonious nature that we've allowed the world to find itself in, and we've allowed it by not realizing this until now, but that's okay, it's divine timing. We get to now move into an age where it's quite extraordinary.
It's not even so much as, oh, we don't want to go there again. It's like, no, we've actually hit rock bottom, and we have nowhere to go except for to ascend at this point. Like, there's just so much pressure, so much shifting. Like, we know that our Gaia, our planet, is shifting into this fourth dimensional consciousness. We're receiving light from solar flares. We've been imparted with so much wisdom through it all, and like we're finding our way back to self. So this is the awakening. So many of us are getting the call towards God, and just going back to our true nature and going back to our spiritual self. So this is kind of like, this is the time. Like, I don't think we can actually fall any further than this. We are just in such a point of separation and such a point in duality that it's like do or die at this point, like we have to rise above. And I think that's why so many of us are getting the call now to find our way back to truth, to move back to that complete, and that ability to be whole and complete. And we're not separate entities from God. We're finding our source. We're connecting to our source. And like I said, now is the time. Like we have to do it.
100%.
And like your next point is like along the way there have been spiritual groups of people
Yeah.
and catalysts who have kind of like kept that torch lit, like that true essence of truth and those true spiritual teachings, as much as, you know, the ancient libraries of Rome were destroyed and burnt, and they've tried to take all the information from us. We've got like stories of places like Tartaria that existed where we once had free energy in the world, and we just hear stories of how that was manipulated and destroyed and taken down, because anytime that we've had this chance to work on our illuminated consciousness, anytime that we've had, you know, time to just like work on ourselves, like everything in the world is so designed to keep us on the hamster wheel and to keep us so distracted and to keep us feeling so separate and apart from our true identity, that it's been these groups that have had to go underground and like hide this information and teach it to a small brotherhood and a group of people. And you know, here we are so blessed to be living in the age of information and just have access to these teachings and kind of have them fall at our lap and kind of fall at the wayside. But, you know, it's also a test to our many lifetimes, what we've been through. We've obviously are meant to wake up at this time. A lot of people are not so lucky. There's a lot of people who just aren't going to come alive in this life. They're going to be those NPCs that we talked about, the non-player characters.
We don't use that term anymore.
Well, just the unawakened, the ones who choose to remain asleep in this lifetime. And obviously, we have found many teachings. Many teachings have found us in this lifetime. Many masters. We've worked with many masters just to, you know, end up getting to find Joel and be where we're at now together.
Yeah, well said. Yeah, there has been these groups. Typically, they've been in secret because of persecution and the perceived power structure at the time with governments and things. Yeah, there've been many, many groups and individuals, avatars. Jeshua, Jesus the Christ, of course, was one of them. Many, many others who have carried the light across the ages, carried the torch. They've been torch bearers to just keep the flame, and sometimes they nearly flickered out, very, very nearly, many, many times, of truth and wisdom, of spirituality, of our true nature for the generations, and passed it on to the next through different tablets, different scrolls, different libraries, different ways of storing information that has kept and nurtured this sacred truth alive through to the point where we are at today. And now today, we are the mystic saints and sages to be, and we are the ones who are the torchbearers to move from carrying the torch to becoming the flame.
So Dale has a great point. He actually just said the DNA stores the information. So
Absolutely does.
yes, we do all have access to this information through our DNA. We all have the potential to wake up in this lifetime. But again, it comes down to our free will. It comes down to our choice. It comes down to our consciousness. And that really does depend on our environment, who we surround ourselves with. You have to make a conscious choice to be a seeker of truth in this life. And I know many of you are making that choice because you're here tonight. But again, this kind of stuff does not appeal to the majority of people, because the majority of people just want to watch videos about cats and sex and, you know, just all the other things that keep them distracted so that they don't have to think about taking on that responsibility themselves, you know, making that choice themselves.
Yeah, the only thing that the DF, the misaligned ones, have been able to do is to distract us from who we really are. And that's the only power they ever have. Yeah. They don't have any other power. The only power they have is to keep you rooted in the belief in two powers by something that they are doing. As soon as you get that in your consciousness, as soon as you really start to unravel this and realize that truth in your consciousness, your whole experience takes on a whole different form. It really does. And anyway. Okay, moving on.
So we
Joel Goldsmith
are going to bring up Joel. David actually already gave you guys quite a bit of background on Joel. He was born in 1892 and he passed away in 1964. And it was actually 1915 when Joel found out that his father, was dying of a serious illness. And it was a chance encounter that he met a Christian Science practitioner, and he just offered him help to come and help his father. And to Joel's surprise, his father recovered completely. And then years later, Joel himself became very ill, and he sought out a Christian Science practitioner. And not only was Joel healed of his physical problem that day, he actually had his very first God experience. And that's when he found out that he also had the healing gift. And there was just a complete and permanent change that took place in his consciousness from that moment on. So then Joel joined a Christian Science church himself. He worked as a Christian Science healing practitioner, and eventually in 1945, he left the church. In 1947, he wrote his first and only book, The Infinite Way, and he kind of just had plans to retire until the message he put out in The Infinite Way started prompting so many people to seek him out as a spiritual teacher. So he started traveling around the world, holding private classes and lectures. He went to Australia, New Zealand, the States, Canada, South Africa, the UK, all across Europe. And he taught his message all the way up until he transitioned in 1964. So Joel never wanted to take ownership for the message. He stated that the principles that were revealed to him were not new, and that they were just originally brought forth by Jesus and other spiritual masters like Buddha and Lao Tzu, yet they had been either lost or diluted along the way. And Joel really just saw himself as an instrument through whom these eternal practices and principles could be revived in the 20th century and with the new modern language that they had in his time.
Mm-hmm. Amazing. Yeah, he does seem to be a very interesting individual. He's you can go and find his works all over the web. He's written over 50 books, well over 50 books. Actually, there are 50 books written with his teachings. He only wrote, 3 or 4 of them?
I thought he only wrote The Infinite Way himself.
He did a couple, I think.
And then the other ones were all his lectures.
Yeah.
And they were just transcribed into books.
Right, yeah. So, yeah. But he only wrote 1 or 2, and the rest have all been transcribed, from what we know, word for word from his lectures. Now, if you go to joelgoldsmithstreaming.com, you can find all the transcriptions from him talking. All the recordings of him talking. There are transcriptions somewhere, maybe not there, but it's kind of a mishmash of teachings, although it is ordered there. What I prefer to do is to read the books first, and then what we do is we listen to Joel before bed. But he is definitely in the presence when he is talking, and you can tell very, very quickly, because those of you who are aware of when you are connected to source and letting that flow, he's definitely doing that. He doesn't prepare any of his lectures. They just come through to him. All he does is go into quiet meditation and connect to God and feel that click or that wave, and then he gets the teaching for the day, and he just presents. As far as I can tell, I wasn't there, but he in his lectures, but he presents largely without prompts and without preparation. It's really quite very, very powerful, in fact. And that's a bit about Joel. That's who we are really, really following the teachings of very diligently right now. And certainly what we're experiencing is testament to he's the real deal.
Yeah, and just one more thing to add, because we are planning on just reading a few excerpts from his book while we're doing our live shows over the next couple of weeks. So Joel's ministry, it really was spanning in like the 1940s and 50s. So just some of the language even that he uses, like he was trying to, bring this new age teaching, but it's like so much has already changed where we're at now just in 2024. I can't believe it's 2024. But Joel would use the words like he uses he when he's describing an individual, whereas like we would use we or they because it's just more inclusive. And Joel always says he. So when you're a female and you're reading these teachings, it can feel very one-sided when you're just reading he. So just keeping that in mind, and when we read some of his material, just keeping that very open mind that this is for everybody and it's for every individual, not just the boys out here.
Right. Yeah, very well said. Okay, moving on. We have a little bit to get through, so now it's your turn. What does that mean? Well, it is now our turn, like I said, to become the flame. It's no longer good enough to carry the torch and be the intellectual bearers of the knowledge. We must become the flame. And I'm fully aware that the vast majority of spiritually minded people on the planet will not be dedicated enough to get to that fully Christed place. Now, that is notwithstanding the galactic superwaves and solar flashes and things like this, which may interweave into that picture. I think personally that it's very much through free will, as many of you do. But for those of you who are serious, for those of you who this reaches, there is an onus of responsibility upon us to shift this paradigm of living by shifting ourselves. And the harmony, the lasting harmony, because there has never been a lasting harmony on this planet, ever. It's never been lasting. It's always been, it's always fallen into the trapdoor of duality. When enough people have reached that Christed activation, that level of illumination, the whole planet will shift. Now, there's different versions of this, and I don't really know what's going to happen, whether they will shift into a different reality, whether there'll be 2 Earths, 3 Earths. There's very differing opinions on this, and each to their own. Whatever resonates with you is fine. But for me, I would like to be here in the physical Earth to help as many people as we can shift. And we don't need the majority of people to shift and to do this work, and that's fine. Everyone's doing their bit. But I love when Joel says one with God is a majority. And of course, David Hawkins talks about this, and many others do. But when one has realized the Christ within him, when one has activated the Christhood, the city will change, the province will change, the world will change. And Jeshua has proved that in many, many ways. You know, his mission here was absolutely a success, a massive success. And of course, if you're into Catholicism and the Catholic Church or what have you, they will present the fact that he was, his life ended terribly. And of course, we know that's not the case in many, many respects, with him coming on, and our interactions with him and your interactions with him prove that you can't while the material body can be let go, you cannot do anything with the soul and consciousness, which is who we really are.
Yeah, and I think just another one to really rattle the religious folk is they're really hell-bent on the second coming of the Christ. Yeah, spoiler alert, the second coming of the Christ, the rebirth of the Christ, it's not going to be Jesus returning, like that. It's the individual Christ consciousness in each individual awaking and rising within us, within each individual consciousness, that is the second coming of the Christ. And that
Yeah.
is in the process of happening with all of us right now.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah, well said. Okay. Moving on. But how do we do this? But how? That moves us on to fourth dimensional consciousness. And I'm going to get into the how in a little bit, but the how we're going to unpack over many, many episodes coming up. For Joel Goldsmith's teachings, from his perspective, and certainly not just his, as he would share, the mystics and saints and sages of old have given us the blueprint. And the blueprint is and this is where Christianity is so close, in fact, but then just falls so far down this pit of nonsense, sorry, and ignorance. And I mean that with the highest respect, that building a relationship with the Creator is the number one route to elevating from the disharmonies of the material world, elevating above it. And what I wanted to touch on very briefly here, we're going to get into this in other shows. The mind that was in Christ Jesus is what we are aiming for. And his teachings, if you believe certainly some of the Christian Bible scriptures, lay it all out very, very clearly with those for eyes to see. And certainly when you start practicing these teachings, they are very, very true. Now, what Jesus did, if you really are interested in the Christian Bible, or if you're from a religious background, is he came in and he got rid of Moses' 10 Commandments. And essentially what he did is he got rid of got rid of 8, actually, not all of them, got rid of 8 of them and kept 2. And if I misquote this, forgive me, but one of them was to love thy God with all thy heart, all thy soul, all thy mind. And the second one was what? It was to love thy neighbor as thyself. Now, when you, thank you, S. Brown, whoever you are, for that donation, very, very kind. Well, I see it on the screen here. When you go deep into those 2 principles, especially building a relationship with God, which is encompassed by loving thy God with all thy soul, thy heart, thy mind, your whole world will start to transform. Now, I'm not, again, talking about poking at this. I'm not talking about, and when I talk about connecting to God, not some separate entity outside of you, although our soul is not God, it is an extension of source, pure God energy. Again, the analogy of the sun and the sunbeam. The sunbeam is not the sun, but it is fully connected to the sun and can't exist without it at all times. They're inseparable. There is no sunbeam and the sun. There is just the sun. And so too, when we are thinking about ourselves and God, there is no us and God. There is the one I, which is the divine. And certainly from our practicing of this work, the only way to move into this place is to do it gradually, to practice daily the presence of connecting to God. And you can't do that when you're at work. You can't do that when you're running around to get the groceries. You can't do that when you're flitting around the neighborhood. You can bring your awareness in your mind to God, but you cannot get quiet, move your mind out of the way, so you still your mind and allow God to speak to you. You cannot do that through any other way that any mystic has ever taught other than meditation. And meditation requires that you move into a space where ideally it's quiet, you're comfortable, and you can move your mind out of the way. Now, Jesus' teachings talk about this quite a bit, in fact, and we won't go into that necessarily today. But what we have been doing is I think the biggest thing in our daily routine is we have been doing that once or twice a day together and multiple times by ourselves in different capacities. Now, if you have a full-time job, a 9 to 5, or you're out of the house for 9-10 hours a day, think about that, because you're immediately going to say to yourself, well, I haven't got time to do that. It's just too much work. Yeah, but you've got to streamline your life for ascension, guys. You have to put yourself in a position where you have the time to do the work you need to do to fulfill your purpose here on earth. And there are people who this may reach who will use the time excuse. And of course, it's the same with everything. But it's time to get serious about assisting the world by pursuing the activities that helped Jesus create the divine mind activation that he had. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, no, thank you. Because just for a second there, you brought up the 2 great commandments, and you mentioned to love thy neighbor as thyself. And then we had a comment from Dr. Strange Doom, and he just was reminding us gently that we must not.
Who?
Dr. Strange Doom, shout out. He was reminding us not to mock religious folk. So I think when I said that the religious people aren't going to like the fact that the second coming of the Christ is within us, and it certainly wasn't to mock them, but it's a good reminder just to love thy neighbor and to say everything just out of a place of love and definitely not out of a place of mockery. The religious folk out there are doing great things. It's definitely an avenue for people to find God and to connect with spirituality. They have their own truth and they're definitely not wrong. Everybody's where they need to be. So we're not here to say right or wrong, because that just puts us in the bracket of duality and creates more separation. And that's absolutely what we're not here to do. I think
100%.
I just meant that, like, we have discovered the truth that the second coming of the Christ, the awakening of the Christ, is meant to be individual. It's not for one person to return to save us. We are now taking responsibility and putting that onus on ourselves. And it is our belief in 2 powers that created duality. So now it is time to find our way back to God. And again, it's just, I do believe that religion tends to strip us of our power, and it wants us to worship an idol, at least from what I have seen from it. And the spiritual way, the infinite way, is all about taking back our power. And it's not even our power. It's not about taking credit for these things. It's about recognizing the God within, the divine, and allowing that to move through us. So we're really just stepping away from that humanness, stepping out of this material realm, and again, just seeing and recognizing the truth through it all. So I just wanted to thank Dr. Strange Doom and for that reminder, because we're certainly not here to mock everybody. This is always going to be just a very, very loving space where everybody is welcome. And yeah, like, I would love to connect more with Christians. My dad grew up very Christian, and he's actually very open to reading Joel's stuff. And I think, like, even his perspectives are changing on certain things. So as we unfold, it's important for me and for us to get to be a beacon of light, and we certainly don't want to do that in a way that condemns anybody else.
No, certainly, and I certainly wasn't doing that. I know you know me.
No, it wasn't you. I think it was me.
Well, I can come across that way sometimes with the way that I communicate. So I certainly wasn't in that space. I don't think I have a critique or a judging bone, not many left in me. And that's a very good point to make. So anyway, yeah. 4th dimensional consciousness, the mind that was in Christ Jesus. Let's continue.
Okay, 4th dimensional consciousness. I love it. I love that it's 4th dimensional consciousness because it actually feels attainable. It feels possible. You know, we're just moving from the 3rd dimensional consciousness to the 4th dimensional consciousness. And I think that a lot of these spiritual teachers are all about moving into 5D. Like, we're going from 3D to 5D. We're moving into 9D. Like, there's just, like, all of these dimensions. And I think that Joel keeps it real. He talks about the fourth dimensional consciousness, the consciousness that was in Christ Jesus while he was living on earth. We don't think that Jesus is in the fourth dimension anymore. We think he's since obviously elevated beyond that. But while he was here in the human physical plane, performing healings and miracles, you definitely need to be in the fourth dimensional consciousness to do that. And what is the fourth dimensional consciousness? And what is the fourth dimensional consciousness versus somebody in the third dimensional consciousness? So I think that I just want to read a little excerpt from...
Yeah, go ahead.
This is the Parenthesis in Eternity. This is the book I've been reading. It's one of Joel's biggest and thickest books that he has. This is through chapter 23.
Wait, hold that up again, sweetie.
Oh,
sorry.
yeah.
I had the,
okay, there we go. So Parenthesis in Eternity.
It's a big one.
It's a pretty thick book. So I'm working my way through it. I'm on chapter 23. It's called Living in, Through, and by the Spirit. Joel says the attainment of the fourth dimensional or illuminated consciousness is the secret to harmonious, abundant, and gracious living without strife or struggle. The freedom of the illumined is really a freedom from ignorance, because only the ignorant can cleave to the belief that life is dependent on things and people in the external realm. Is not the whole material sense of life characterized by a hope and reliance to the external? So, again, just talking about this fourth dimensional consciousness as the illuminated way of living, which is basically just rising us out of the material sense, making us so we're not dependent on any thoughts or any things that are revolved around the material sense. So
yeah, that's awesome.
I wanted to talk a little bit about the idea of manifesting, because I think that ultimately the whole idea of manifestation is we have a thought and we want to bring it into materialization. Like, it starts with a thought, something that we want to attain, something that we want to have, and then we're now materializing it from thought. So ultimately, just manifesting what we want, because that was kind of what the whole basis of this show was going to be on initially. We had got into a conversation about manifesting, and I think David and I, we still try to manifest things. We just wrote down on a piece of paper our ideal home. As you know, we move around a lot, and we're going to be moving again in June. We're only in this place right now until June 2024, so we're going to have to find another place to live. So we always tend to write down exactly what we want, and we're going to have a perfect landlord with great energy. We're going to have this space, and this is going to be creative and amazing, and this is how much we want to pay. And so we were...
And by the way, we have manifested almost to a room our last two places. So that's interesting.
But the whole subject of manifestation now, when we're learning Joel's teachings...
It's got a whole new meaning, yeah.
...is really taking a whole new meaning, because when you're thinking about something that you want to bring into the material world, or you want to bring into the physical realm of form, it's totally different when you start to have a spiritual understanding. Because yes, if you're living in the 3D material realm, then yes, your thoughts do control the physical. Your thinking mind and your intellectual mind controls the physical, and you can manifest. But when you understand, that there's this other realm out there, the spiritual realm, it's like the spiritual, the invisible life force energy behind everything, that actually has dominion over the mind and over the body. So I just was thinking about the topic of manifestation when we brought up some of these points. And, Joel basically goes on to say, the truth is life governs the external realm. But to come into agreement with that, we must understand that our body and our mind belong to us. So basically, they are just tools that we have. And a lot of times when we're in that three-dimensional space of thinking, it's the other way around. The body has a physical ailment and that governs the way that we think. Or, we're still trying to really manifest from the mind. So, yes, we're just coming from that fourth dimensional consciousness is really that spiritual consciousness where it governs the mind and the body.
Yeah, I want to just touch on something real quick. We'll probably do a whole segment on this, and that is the divine laws. Mm-hmm. Now, when you get into people who are atheistic or a sort of a self-appointed atheists, people like Ricky Gervais, whether that's true or not, whether it's just a sort of a comedic thing, I really don't know. He seems to always promote that he's an atheist, although he seems to be very open-minded in conversation. But what you can disprove an atheist very, very quickly. Not that you're trying to cause arguments or things like this, but here is how. And here is how you can absolutely witness the fact that God is omnipresent, omnipotent, and omniscient, all-knowing, all powerful, or present. And it's something called the divine laws. And I do want to do a complete segment on this. I'll just touch on it quickly. Is that, and this ties into manifestation. When you look at the natural kingdom, when you look at nature, and you really study it, and you start to do research on it, and you see all the components that are coming together in an ecosystem, in an area. You can, of course, expand that to planetary or into forests and bigger and oceans, and then it will really blow your mind. When you really go into the intricate details of how an ecosystem works, it's absolutely staggering. And the most staggering thing about it is you come back and you go, well, who's doing all that? It's not all the animals talking to each other. It's not all the people who are controlling the ecosystem. That's quite impossible, in fact. In fact, it's evident when we get involved with it, it all, excuse my French-Canadian, goes to shit. So that's a very, very interesting contemplative thought to go into, is to look at the natural kingdom and think, hold on a minute, there is some all-powerful, all-knowing, all-present, benevolent force that is in operation all the time. And when you go into that, you can go a step further and you can say, okay, everything in the natural kingdom is harmonious. Okay? And Joel says the only discord in the world is in the human world. That's interesting. So when you go into the human body, let's take it one step further, you can look at, and again, when you do the intricate research on this, and I'm going to put some slides up for you in a couple of weeks, is the miracles that are happening in your body, the systems that are in operation right now as I talk, are absolutely extraordinary. The amount of times since I've been talking that your heart has beat, the amount of blood cells that have been moved through your body in 24 hours, the amount of blood cells that have been recycled. I could go on for 10 minutes. Mm-hmm. The miracles that are happening in your body are absolutely extraordinary. However, there is a distinct and unarguable correlation to the divine laws that are going within you now, to the divine laws that are going on within nature. Now, of course, there's a side comment here about how the Creator has created you in His image. For example, look at a nebula, the human eye, look at lightning, the veins in your hand, the veins on a leaf, the veins in your hand, or the hand markings, the bark on a tree, your skin, etc. There's someone who's done sort of a comparison on these things. It's the same artist. And so you start to build this irrefutable picture that there is this benevolent, all-powerful force that is in governance in the world when it's allowed to be in governance. Now, you cannot use that power. You cannot use it, but you can be used by it. And that's extremely important, because when we get into this topic of manifesting, and jump in any time here, we can manifest from two places. We can manifest from the material mind, which ultimately will serve us, and traditionally no one else. Although God, if you allow God to work, will benefit others, of course. There is some element of God there to a degree. But if you are manifesting before a certain level of consciousness activation, that is completely detrimental to God's plan. And we've all done it, we all do it. And it's a very, very important point, because manifesting from the divine mind is serving the harmonious nature of the world in sync with God's plan, and manifesting from the material mind has the potential to screw everything up. Okay, that's kind of a harsh way to put it, but it's a very interesting thought. Jump in there if you want, honey.
Yeah. Well, yeah, no, that's amazing. And you touched on so many things. So you talked about the animal kingdom and just what is that substance that makes everything harmonious? What is that working substance? What is that brings everything into creation? And what exactly are we manifesting from? Like when we're either manifesting in the material world, like you said, or manifesting from the divine mind and actually like bringing forth into creation. What is that power? And obviously the answer is consciousness. And Joel, he reveals the secret in this chapter as well. And he said, if through our consciousness we manifest a certain amount of supply, and if for some reason it gets wiped away, what difference does it make if we still have the consciousness that brought it forth? Which is incredible, because you're talking about the natural kingdom. So he goes on to say, it's the same as stripping a tree of all its fruit. What difference does it make as long as you still have the tree? The tree is still intact. So in due season, another crop is going to come along, because that is just the nature of the tree. And so too, it is the nature of our consciousness to produce and reproduce and multiply, so that regardless of what gets taken away from us, the consciousness within remains, and tomorrow it will start producing again.
Right.
So
it's all powerful, all knowing, all present.
Yeah, so the real difference between, this third dimensional consciousness and the fourth dimensional consciousness, is many things. But when we're in that third dimensional place, that material place, that separation from God, we really believe that we have a consciousness of our own.
Yeah.
So we are measuring the fruitage in terms of our education and experience, which is limited. It's going to be what you've experienced in your human life, and therefore it does not have the essence to bring forth infinity.
Yeah.
The consciousness, the fourth dimensional consciousness, it's living by grace than it is by effort. You don't have to sit there and put thought into, what you're going to do for supply and what you're going to do. The fourth dimensional consciousness, Joel says, sees the discord, but it doesn't become hypnotized by it. It's an enlightened consciousness, and it can see both abundance and lack as temporary phases of existence. So maybe it's here today, maybe it's gone tomorrow. It really just makes little difference in the appearance because the reality is still there, and the reality is consciousness.
Yeah.
So we're here to really think in terms of consciousness. Like a third dimensional human being is going to see an ailing body and see a disturbed mind, and they're just going to want to do something about it. The fourth dimensional consciousness is going to see the same issues, and they're just really going to see through it and see the appearance. And it's not that it doesn't have awareness. It's just they're not giving it power in this reality. They know that it doesn't really exist here, and it's just the appearance of what's existing. So Jesus Christ saw the crippled man, but while his physical eye took cognizance of the condition, his inner eye saw through the appearance to the man's Christhood. And it's just very interesting. It doesn't really, in terms of manifesting, it doesn't really matter how many affirmations you say or what you focus on. It's really the truth of your consciousness, like what you believe, what you truly believe in your state of consciousness. Like that's what is going to manifest. And
we've experienced this in action. And many of you have, I know, but quite significantly more when we've got into Joel's work. Now, I can't get into examples of this because there's so many. In fact, we go throughout a week where a whole day is just literally littered with this. And sometimes it's as quick as you're thinking of something and someone else comes and gives it to you. Like there was one example I can think of. We were out star watching. I was thinking of needing a blanket. And before I even finished the thought, Amy went up and got a blanket and gave it to me. So that's a small example, and we've experienced many more, and some way crazier than that, some sort of on the same level. Is you start to go, okay, we call it synchronicity, but it's God in action. And of course, when we allow that to happen, when we stop using the ego mind, the material mind so much, we have access to everything. And that's why when the scripture talks about all that I have is thine. God is already going before you to prepare mansions, to make the crooked places straight, to prepare miracles for you, move mountains for you. And it's all in the Christian scriptures. It's very, very curious when you have the mystical mind to unpack. There's everything you need in the Bible to ascend. Unfortunately, it's been mistranslated and misrepresented, and of course, a lot of things have been left out and what have you. But it's all there, and it's really fascinating to see Joel bring it forth in such a powerful, potent, truthful way.
Yeah, I think anybody who reads the Bible will tell you that it can be interpreted in so many ways, right? Just getting back to the topic of manifestation. So when you're manifesting from that fourth dimensional consciousness, you're really not manifesting. You're just living in that divine flow, and you're letting God move through you, and you're letting that humanness move out of the way. But right now, it's just really most of us have not received illumination. Like most of us just aren't at that place. Like truthfully, if we're being honest, we're all in a third dimensional state of consciousness still, even you and I included.
100%.
Especially you and I included. So we identify with having a consciousness of our own, and therefore we are manifesting from limitation.
I want to talk about that quickly because, not to cut you off there, but it's an important point because Well,
I wasn't finished.
Go on.
But
Go on.
I was just going to say that, we have limiting thoughts. We have limiting beliefs. And when we are creating from that space of trying to almost like forcefully create, then we don't even realize it, but we create friction and we create resistance in our own life. That's all I wanted to finish and say
Perfect.
about that, because I was going to lead into the next topic.
Yeah, I was just going to say that I don't believe the planet is in fourth density consciousness. We may sort of slip in and out of it. I don't believe we're fully there. And it's very, very evident, because when you look at the fourth dimensional consciousness in terms of Christ Jesus the Christ, it's very clear that we're quite far off that. And I see a lot of spiritual teachers and people out there sort of calling themselves the 5D coach and all this stuff. And it's quite misrepresented, in fact. And I think we've all done it to some degree, us who have social media presences. But I want to just address that, because the vast majority of spiritual teachers and practitioners that I've interviewed, which is most of them you see in the public arena, most with big accounts and what have you, are communicating to you from a place of intellectual knowledge when it comes to spirituality. And that's not a dig at them, that's not a critique, but it's something to be aware of, because, and us included to a large degree, as we go deeper on this path of illumination, you start to realize that most of the spiritual knowledge or spirituality thrown around is only intellectual. It's purely there. And knowledge by itself is quite worthless, but it can lead to, for the physicists among you, it can lead to, from potential energy to kinetic energy, from being still to being moving. So knowledge used, that's where the power comes in. But knowledge by itself is quite useless. You know, a library full of books is quite useless. It's about going to use that and, in fact, be used by it.
Yeah, putting it into practice. So how do we enter the fourth dimensional consciousness? You know, you just said you don't really believe that we're there yet.
Yeah.
So how do we enter the fourth dimensional consciousness? And I know you wanted to talk about dying daily and some of those kind of things.
Right.
Did you want me to go?
Let's sort of go into it, and organically we can sort of intercede with each other.
Because I have a little portion I can read here.
Yeah, let's just talk about, there's a few things we want to go into. Then we want to go into a quick meditation, guys. I'm going to wrap up.
Before the 2 hour mark
the 2
here,
hour mark,
we
yeah.
really are David Wilcock.
I know we are. We suddenly are David Wilcock. There's something that the Bible, the Christian Bible, and other spiritual teachings talk about called dying daily. And you don't really know what it is until you start practicing the presence, until you really get into the mystical work, because you realize how rooted you are in the material beliefs, in the belief in two powers, because it is, and no fault of our own, we've been born into a world steeped in duality. And unless you have mystics as parents, which is extremely unlikely, by its own definition, it's actually probably not possible. But I'll leave that there. Is you've been indoctrinated, as we have, into the material ways of being. And so when you start to unravel that by practicing the presence, by building a relationship with the Creator, you realize very, very quickly how steeped and how entrenched and how deep the mud is that you're walking through in material belief systems. And dying daily is about seeing what comes up for you as you practice the presence, because there's going to be a whole litany of things that you realize that you're entrenched in that you actually didn't realize. And it's only unearthed, it's only dug up through the process of doing the work. And we certainly experience that day to day. We experience it weekly, we experience it moment to moment. The things that we have conditioned ourselves to believe is quite extraordinary. And we use the term ignorant quite a bit. It's quite a negatively recognized word, I think, but we don't use it in that way. It simply means for us now, just ignorant of the real truth. And we'll fully admit that we're pretty ignorant sometimes. We can certainly have our ignorant moments. They're few and far between now compared to what they used to be for me, in my opinion and my self appraisal of that. Anyway, do you want to jump in, Poogie?
Yeah, like so many words have negative connotations. And I think that we need to start seeing through a lot of, again, the appearance and holding on to maybe the attachment that we have to a lot of the words, and just realize that, again, it's part of this human world. We're kind of limited by language and the words that we use. So, yeah, it's just part of being human, but so much is just letting go of all of those concepts and just opening ourselves up. And again, we have so many beliefs here and so much that we identify with. And one of the major things is just, that separateness, feeling separate and apart from God. So Joel says the only way that we can really arrive at a state of complete self-reliance and attain any sort of measure of fourth dimensional consciousness is with the knowing that I and the Father are one. So again, he likes to say the Father, but I and God are one, and all that God has is mine. So we've inherited all that God has because we are all essentially children of God. We're all that ray of sunshine from the sun. Like, we are that same divine spark and that same source.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So, he recommends just closing our eyes to the outside world and having this inner conviction and knowing that we are all one and we are all of that source. So getting that feeling of separation, getting that feeling that, God is some entity separate up in the sky away from us. And only when you start to really move into this illumination and into this fourth dimensional state of consciousness, so much of that is letting go. As I mentioned, it's just letting go to like all of these preconceived notions that we come in as humans, all of these layers that we build up over time, identifying with. And when you think about the material world and the material 3D consciousness sense of life, it's all about attaining. It's all about what can I gain? What can I own? What can I have? What can I, bigger, better. We always want more of this, more of that. But with letting go, we as humans tend to experience grief. We tend to feel like we're losing something that we once had. And I think that we're all just taught how to gain, but none of us are really comfortable with the concept of loss. None of us are comfortable with the concept of letting go.
Or we've not been taught how to process that.
Yeah, or we've not been taught how to lose or how to let go. So just reading this last little portion here that I wanted to talk about.
Yeah, go ahead.
It just says, we do not try to demonstrate person, things, or conditions, because if we succeed in gaining any desired object, then we might be afraid to let it go. Isn't that the truth? And on the spiritual path, we must not be afraid to let anything or anyone go. In fact, at least once a day, there should be a period where we focus on releasing this world and everything and everyone in it. Because we know that everything here, everything of form, everything is temporary. And it's ever changing. And it's here one day and gone the next. And it's coming and going. And it's rebirthing. And it's dying. And it's cycles. And we on the spiritual path need to get very, very comfortable with change. And we need to get comfortable with loss. And with this illumination and with this fourth dimensional consciousness, it really brings so much freedom and so much peace, because we are no longer dependent on people or things And relationships can get very complicated, as you know, when people are very dependent on each other. And when we're looking to somebody to be something for us or to provide something for us, Joel says it is impossible to want anything from anybody and not have friction develop. No matter how close two people may be, the moment one of them wants something from the other, a defense mechanism is set up and conflict ensues. There is no way to enjoy a perfect human relationship except to want nothing from anybody. And then we will have normal, happy relationships because we are free to share without thinking of getting anything in return. And ultimately, I think it's the same principle when it comes to manifestation. And that's what we were talking about earlier. The minute that you put all this like pressure and expectation on something, again, we can lose it. And we just immediately create that resistance in our life. So I think that the oneness is a huge key point in being able to move into the fourth dimensional state of consciousness, and really learning to let go is another huge component of moving into that illuminated place.
Yeah, I totally agree. Yeah, well said. Well, we're going to move towards a meditation here, guys, and just finish the show with that. I think we've probably covered the vast majority of what we want to today. So if you need to get headphones, I'm going to layer in some music in a moment here. Or if you need to move into a quieter space where you won't be interrupted for about 5 to 10 minutes, probably maximum. We're going to do a 2-part meditation in terms of Kelley is going to read the first half and I'm going to read the second half. And we want to then have probably just a couple of minutes of silence after that, just to practice getting still and getting out of the way. So let's sort of move into that. I want to just maybe grab that piece of music. Hold on.
Yeah, I was just going to ask you if you were going to have any music we could layer in. So again, this is something that we can't hear. So you'll have to let us know how that sounds and if it's too loud. And then maybe after we come out of the meditation, we can do a short Q&A.
Yeah.
Just to kind of finish off the show, because this is a very short meditation. This is one of Joel's meditations, so it's a little bit different than what we normally do. And I think that like what David and I practice mostly from Joel's meditations is really just getting quiet, silencing that overthinking mind, and just trying to develop a listening attitude of receptivity and communion with God. So just really feeling whatever comes through. Sometimes it helps to just lay down, relax. If you want to sit up, just maybe keep your feet grounded on the ground. Just really feel into being very supported by the chair, by the bed, wherever you are. Just feeling really good, just feeling really grounded, feeling really present. And we'll just try to still the thinking mind. We've talked about a lot of stuff, so it's probably very good for us to still our thinking minds.
So let's just do a quick sound check here. How is that music, guys, with my microphone and the music in the background? Does it need to go up or down? Can you just let me know in the chat? That'd be great. And then we're going to go straight into the meditation here to close out the show. So I'll just wait for
Thank you, Ted.
one or two of you to comment and let me know how the volume is, because I'll need a few people to let me know how it is in their space to get an overall consensus. So I'll just wait for that.
Lots of good comments tonight. Thank you guys all for participating. Of course, we went so much longer than we thought we would.
Yeah, just only 45 minutes to an hour longer. Oh my goodness.
All right, well, we'll just have to go with Ted. He said good volume. So everyone else is just going to have to...
Ted?
Yeah,
Maybe a little less music from Thomas, okay. It's good. Okay, well, we got differing opinions here.
Turn it down a little bit.
I did just turn it down a fraction. Alright, sweetie, go ahead.
All right, family of light. Thank you so much for joining us here tonight. Just take a couple of deep breaths. Get grounded. Feel into your space. Just feel into these words. I and the Father are one. It's the truth about every man, woman, and child that exists on the face of the planet, saint or sinner. It is that our spiritual identity, I and my Father, are one. There is not God and man. There is not God and you. There is God made manifest individually as you and me. There is God expressed individually as you and me. God appears on earth as individual being. The life, which is God, is your individual life. The mind, which is God, is your mind. The soul, which is God, is your soul. The Spirit of God is the spirit of man, and even your body is the temple of the living God. I and my Father are one. And the Father says, Son, thou art ever with me, and all that I have is thine. God is expressed as individual being, and all that the Father hath is manifested right here. The kingdom of God is within me. If I desire anything at all, I go right here. If I seek the healing light or consciousness, I must turn within. The kingdom of God is within me. I must turn within, and I must let it come into manifestation or expression, because in our humanhood, our Christhood is locked up inside of us. My task then is to find an inner peace, an inner communion with that which we call the Father within, to get so quiet, so still with that listening ear that sooner or later we can feel something released. It is like a release, as if a weight fell off of our shoulders, and all of the sudden we were released from the strain of our own humanhood and thinking. Sometimes we experience a feeling at the solar plexus, a warmth. Sometimes it may be the hands that feel warm. All of these things are effects, and they are relatively unimportant. How you feel the presence of God is an individual experience within you, and you may feel it an entirely different way than I do. And so it is.
Love is the fulfilling of the law. In this moment of spiritual communion, I have no envy in my heart. I have no desires in my heart, No jealousy, no greed, no lust, no animosity. I set this world free. There is nothing it has that I want. Since I and the Father are one, I receive my good by the grace of God. And whatever good should flow into me and from me, I freely give to all, to every neighbor, friend, or foe, as I know the infinity of my being is thus. Now, if you have purged yourself to that extent and can honestly feel that you have released anyone and everyone, then you are now ready for your prayers to reach the center of your being, because now there is no obstruction. Mystical teachings tell us that love is the fulfilling of the law, so don't try to get the law to operate in the absence of love. And love means forgiveness. Love means forbearance. Love means to be inwardly clean. Clean of hate, jealousy, envy, malice, greed, and all these negative minor qualities. It may not be possible to go through an entire day or night with some of these negative qualities creeping in on us. And that is why we have become human beings instead of still being back in the Garden of Eden. We are here to bring memory forward of our true nature. But we can purge ourselves twice a day, 3 times a day, and so on. And we can look every man and woman in the face and say, I have released you into the realization of your God being. I know that you and your God, the God, are one. And all that God has is yours. So let us take a couple of deep breaths at the end here and go into 2 minutes of silence. And in our mind's eye, let us ask the Creator to move into our consciousness, move into our awareness. Let us ask God to reveal itself to us. Let us move our mind aside. Let us begin the silent meditation. So when you're ready to start to come back to the physical, start to feel back in the body. Whenever you're ready, just come back and open your eyes. Feeling fully alive, fully present, fully connected in the flow. I think my video is glitching a bit there, but welcome back, my friends. That does wrap up tonight's show.
I was going to say that your video is glitching. I don't know why it always does that when you have the meditation and then we come back. It seems to always do that.
It's weird.
Yeah, so that was different. That was great.
Mm-hmm.
I really enjoyed that. I enjoyed that show, and thank you so much for just sticking with us, guys.
Mm-hmm.
We did a full 2 hours tonight, and I don't think we're going to go that long in the future. We're going to have to slim it down, honey, to an hour, including the meditation for next week. So if anybody has any quick questions or comments to close the show, we will definitely turn our attention to you guys while we finish explaining what's going to be coming up next week.
Yeah, for next week's show, guys, for those of you who are not on the mailing list, please hop on over to thesunflowerlife.com, thesunflowerlife.com. Scroll to the bottom of the page and pop your email into the little capture field there so we can have your email address and send you all the updates and latest and greatest news from the Sunflower Life. Next week we have a very powerful show next Thursday called The Infinite Invisible, where we will be going deep and deeper still into God. God.
Okay. Also, I think that it's important to talk about some of this, dare I say, intensity that's been happening already. And it's not just one person that said it. It's multiple people that I talk to on a daily basis who have said that actual spiritual attacks have been taking place since January 1st. And so many people, so many spiritual people, and just everybody, it's like they've been going through so much stuff.
Yeah.
And so much stuff has been coming up for us to, again, let go of. It's just like so much adversity, so many challenges, so many struggles. Everybody we know is getting hit hard financially. And there's all these other aspects where it seems really difficult for a lot of people right now. So I do think it's very important to touch on that. And I know you don't like talking about anything negative.
Well, I know that now it's not necessarily that. It's important to recognize where there might be discord in your life for various reasons. However, I do think that it just boils down to one thing again, and that is somewhere, if you're experiencing discord in your experience, whatever it may be, yes, it is helping you grow, but the disharmony is appearing because at some point in your consciousness or mine, you believe in a power apart from God. And that is the only reason why something is happening in your life that is discordant.
Yes, I would have to agree with you, dear, but it's still happening and it's still very challenging. Like, you know that even for us to be in a really good place in our relationship and spiritually and solid in a lot of our convictions and our knowings, it's still very challenging to stop believing in two powers. It's still very difficult because the fear does creep in. And I had a point, but I didn't have a chance to mention it tonight. It's like a lot of these times, it's not even our fear. It's that we're all connected and we're all one. And there's so much universal belief that we end up feeling and picking up on other people's fear and doubt and worry. And it's like until we do reach that fourth dimensional consciousness, we're actually still affected by a lot of these third dimensional, discords. So I
Yeah,
think that at some degree, like, it's okay to talk about those
there's
things.
nothing wrong with talking about it. It's
And it's like, how do
what
we
I'm
forge the path forward? And like,
what I'm saying is that you do have to let it move through you, because creating resistance to it is the wrong approach. So that's absolutely valid. I'm saying that there's a lot of spiritual healing out there that goes on, or a lot of spiritual teachers who talk about healing, and they place an emphasis on maybe sitting with your problem rather than allowing it to move through you. And the only way you allow it to move through you is you anchor your attention on the fact that there is no power other than God. That's the deepest core of the way through the clouds. Now, is that easy to do? Well, no. When you're going through discord in the human experience, that's all you can see, it's all you can smell, it's all you can feel. So there's no question about that. I'm just saying, just be mindful about how you stay. It's one thing to embrace the energies. It's one thing to recognize they're there. It's quite another to say that's where I'm staying, and that's all there is. So there's a balance to be had with that viewpoint and realization. And we talk about that a lot. I know you get that. So I think, I can definitely comment to the strength of the energies in February. And I mean, the last 3 years have been extraordinary, but February was very intense. I did feel that in my physical body, and we're still feeling it now. We're still feeling the potency of the energies. It's not stopped. It's still going on. I would say we've sort of moved. The sun has come through the clouds quite a bit more for us now, and that we're on the way out of it. And if that's you as well watching this, then great. And if you're still going through it, then great. There's seeds of opportunity and growth to be coming from that, and we have to draw those from it. But yeah, they've been intense, no question.
I think ultimately I agree with you. And I think that these podcasts and these weekly unpackings, and it's almost like a reminder, for us, for our community, for the people going through those things. And it'll be helpful, I think, in getting through a lot of that. And I think it will be helpful in doing these meditations and just bringing us back to that place where we can focus more on the good stuff and less on some of these disharmonies. And, I think we both put a lot of emphasis on 2024 being that year of where everything is really coming to that culmination of just like everything is built on nothing. Like there's just no foundation and no love and so much disharmony and so much separation. And this is really that culmination point. This is that year. It's very intense. Alicia's on here tonight. We had a great conversation for about an hour and a half before the podcast tonight. And we're just talking about some of the planetary alignments because, she's really into that. And she's amazing because she's super open-minded about how, the mainstream world says that we're moving into the age of Aquarius, but really we're not. We're moving into the age of Capricorn, and that is really the destructuring and tearing down the old, and these old systems are falling apart, and it needs to happen this way to make way for the new path. So, she's really open to just this new astrology where the planets actually are in the sky, and she's saying like there's a whole bunch of planets like in alignment with Pluto, and that is really bringing up a lot of that discord and disharmony, and that's just kind of where the energy's at. And we are living here in these human bodies, and our human bodies are prone to a lot of these kind of cycles, and the collective, especially that universal carnal mind, is very much affected and, believing in all of this stuff. And we are very much attached to all of them, and we're connected to all of that. So I know I struggle more than you with these kind of things, but...
Yeah, I know. And when we talked about the divine laws, which I'm going to do a slightly deeper dive on in future episodes, because it's fascinating to really watch the creator in action. It really is amazing. It's mind-blowing. Is if you want to take another step into that realm of unbelievedness, look at the way that the cosmic cycles, the galactic cycles and the universal cycles run with the planets and the stars and the moons and all the whole galaxy and the universes. It's quite extraordinary how things are just operating. And of course, there are different periods of different energies as a result of that. The creator made the universe perfectly. It's just extraordinary.
Yeah, and a comment here, Moon Leah, she's so sweet. What about situations out of our control? And then Dale comments and says, you don't even have control over your own heartbeat or breath. So again, there's just so many things that really are out of our control. And again, the more we try to take control over them, the more inadvertently, we're actually kind of fighting things, we're resisting things, and we're creating more of that friction. Yeah. So again, like letting go, relinquishing control, letting the divine be the seat, be the driver in the driver's seat. And I think that ultimately that divine, that God, that universe, it knows, it's the omnipresent, omnipotent, omniscient, all-seeing, all-powerful, all-knowing. So we don't know better than the universe. We don't know better than God.
No.
So for us to try to take control and say, this is what's happening and this is what we're doing and this is what we're manifesting, ultimately, we're saying we know better.
Well, we're saying we haven't yet established a trust in the higher power.
Yeah,
but too. We're saying that by saying that. But yeah, no, guys, if you have a question, do send us an email, sunflowerlifedk@gmail.com. I'll link it in the description below. But I think we want to clock off here. We're out of time. We can go on if we want, but we're out of time from how long we'd like to go on. But we want to thank you for joining us. We want to thank you for your attendance and your presence, the work you're doing, and your studiousness to your own ascension. We know it's not an easy path to be a light bearer, torch bearer, but we're all in it together. By sessions like this and by building community and unity as a result, we all get to get through it and give each other permission to go through it. And that's really, really important. So whatever you're going through, if it's bliss and harmony, great. If it's disharmony, then get closer to God. That's our message.
Check yourself before you wreck yourself.
Yeah.
Okay, Moon Leah, don't even get me started on ants. She just made a comment that she has ants in the bathroom. And if any of you have watched my recent videos lately, don't even get me started on ants right now. I don't think David wants to hear me talk about that anymore this month than I already have. And a comment came in to make captions available.
We'll see what happens
on our video. So can you do that, Mr. Tech Guy?
Not when we're live, no.
Mr. Accent Man?
Not unless you ask God to do it when we're live.
Nobody can understand you because of your British accent.
What they're going to say before we say it. But you can click on CC. You can click on closed captions after the show if you want to watch it back. But no, we can't do it on live, unfortunately. Anyway, let's clock off, shall we?
Yes.
All right, let's clock off. But thank you guys for joining us. Get on that mailing list to never miss on the show. We've got some really, really powerful topics coming up and what we've been practicing, and we're excited to share that with you. So we love you. We will see you very, very soon, and we wish you a wonderful entry into the weekend. Lots of love, guys.
Yes, we have our next live show coming up next Thursday, March 14th. So we will see you all then, same time, same bat channel.
Okay. Towards the light we go.
Towards the light we go.
All right, guys.